Hey guys, this is DoomKrakken. We're going to be learning about dual wielding, and I've decided to go and split this into about 3 different videos covering this topic because there are a bunch of ways that you can handle this. We're going to do a very simple way with overlays. Well, they will all involve overlays, but we're going to use overlays in order to essentially create a glorified double firing speed sort of weapon, a weapon that'll fire faster, but it will actually look like it's firing from 2 weapons. It will seem to fire from 2 different weapons, or rather, the same weapon but mirrored. This would essentially constitute an over-glorified double firing speed sort of weapon. So, without any further ado, let's begin. So, as you can see here, we already have our sounds and our sprites already here. These resources actually all come from the Quake Champions Doom Edition mod for UZDoom. Not QZDoom, it's QZendronum. That's what it's called. For QZendronum now, because now it has its own dedicated source port engine. Very cool project, by the way. But in any case, I like to use a lot of placeholders for my projects from the QCDE mods that are out there. So yeah, we actually got a whole bunch of sounds and a whole bunch of sprites. Yeah, so those are the sounds, sprites. I'm actually using like the nails from... Oh, let me zoom in here. I like to use the nail sprites that they use there, because those actually just to show off the projectile. But we're actually going to be using the machine gun graphic, the small machine gun, not the heavy one. Where we're going to be using the machine gun graphic for the purposes of this demonstration. Okay, so we can just close that up for now. In any case, we're going to want to we'll go start off with a soundinfo.txt file right here, so we'll just do that real quick. Ready? And we're going to go and just define all our sounds real quick. So, first off, one thing that I like to do is $pitch shift range 0. This way, if you happen to have the option to randomize the pitch of a sound by a random amount, you can actually keep the entire set of sound files constant by keeping the range at 0. And I like to do that because I don't like a lot of the... I prefer to do that myself because I don't like the randomized sounds so much. I usually keep the option off, but if I happen to have it on for some reason, I like to keep these consistent. Anyway, we're going to go define weapon/raise. That's going to be defined as sounds webswitch.ogg. That would be this one. Right? And then we're going to apply a $limit weapon/raise 0. This way you can have an infinite amount of these playing at the same time without the engine clamping it to only a certain amount of instances of the sound playing. So we'll be doing that for all of our sounds here. Just be aware that if you do this too much with a lot of your sounds, then you may overload the entire experience, I guess, if too many sounds are playing all at once. But sometimes it is helpful to be able to hear everything without things getting cut off. So just be wary of that. That's why I usually like to keep this. I like to have the limits defined as 0 for almost every sound that I do, but it's up to personal preference. Anyway, weapon/fire. It's going to be sounds sng_single.ogg. I'm going to give that a limit of 0 as well. Then we're going to have a whole bunch of random sounds played. Well, one sound that will play one of these other sounds played at random. Projectile/impact, right? And then within that, we're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 1. Oops. That's not supposed to go there. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? Over here, we're going to go for, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I did Alt-Shift up. You could do down if you're not planning to do down, but this will add a cursor to each of these lines. So that way I can do projectile / impact. And then we'll go for... I'll add the numbers in a bit, the number suffixes as in a bit, but give me one moment. Sounds / nail impact .ogg. Okay, so then we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we'll do Alt-Shift up again and left, Alt-Shift left. And then I can place it over here, and that will get all of that done right there. Alrighty, and then the next thing, of course, is limiting this to 0. Limit projectile / impact 0. And that will give us our sound info. All right, now for the meat of this entire thing, we're gonna go enter the following into the C script.txt. Okay, so as per usual, we still haven't updated. There haven't been any new updates to UZDoom since the last video, so we're gonna go for version 4.12.2. I'm just gonna go get enable the coloring over here real quick. Alrighty, perfect. So we'll go call this one Dual-Wield MG. So we're gonna go call it class Dual-Wield MG. We'll have it inherit from weapon. We're going to have it utilize a Boolean, so we'll call it offhand, because there will be that'll trigger something later for if it needs to fire from the other hand. You can have that staggered firing mode. Okay, in our default block, we're going to give it, let's see, we want this to have actually, I know what I'm going to do here. So I have a whole bunch of weapon properties. I have 9 of these. So I'm going to create 9 lines actually. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Shift up. Weapon dot. That should do it. We want ammo type 1 to be none. We could actually just go for ammo type either way, and that'll actually correspond to the same thing. So we want this to be none. We want the bob range X to be 0.3. This is a way that I had it in many of my other mods. 2.1 for Y. Bob speed as 2.5. These are all embellishments, by the way. You can handle these this whatever way you want in your own mods. So, but this is just to give this weapon in particular some flair. Okay, we want Bob's style to be inverse. We want the selection order to be 1, and its slot number to be 2. This way we can select it before the Doom pistol. And then we want the up sound to be weapon / raise. This way it'll automatically play this sound upon raising. And then I like to do weapon scale X to be 1.2. This way this will actually match the weapon scale Y of being 1.2, so that we can combat that compensation for aspect ratio distortion, because I don't like to use it for that. I don't like having to deal with that at all. Okay, let's see. I don't want this weapon to gib things, so we're gonna give it the don't gib flag. Actually, no, that's not what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make it so that way it can't be gibbed by crushers. We don't want that to happen, so I add the don't gib flag for that. Then a couple of other inventory flags over here. So we're gonna go for inventory no screen flash and undroppable. This way you don't happen to drop your weapon with any sort of drop function, and it doesn't flash whenever you pick it up. Again, embellishments. You don't have to do this for your own mods. Let's see, we're gonna have 3 weapon flags here, so weapon dot alt ammo optional. This way, if for some reason you happen to have a secondary ammo type defined, it won't deselect if you or refuse to fire if you don't have any of that ammo. Dot no alert and weapon dot no auto aim. This way it won't, well, auto aim. Here we go. Okay, now let's actually get to the meat of this thing. States. I said we were going to go to the meat of this, but now we're actually at the meat. Spawn. So we want those sprites open. Q, C, G, 2, Y, -1. Stop. So that's going to be this thing over here. The standard gun sprite. Select. TNT1A0, we're going to put in an anonymous function right here. And this is where we're going to start using our overlays. We're going to call A overlay 2. We're going to have it play the raise animation. We're going to define that in a bit. But what we're actually going to be doing here, for those of you who are usually used to actually binding animations to the states that call these functions, we're actually going to divorce the two. So the real meat of the weapon is actually going to be invisible. It's not going to render any sprites. It's going to will call functions, overlay functions, that will create the animations. Those will play the animations, but the real meat of the thing will actually not render anything at all. So that's why we're primarily going to be using the TNT1 sprite, which won't display anything. Okay, let's see. So down here, we're also going to want to do overlay -2 raise anim, because we're going to both of them play the same animation. Then A overlay flags. And the first one's going to be 2 PS PF pivot %. True. So we're going to apply the PSPF pivot % flag. We're going to enable that for the second for overlay 2, right? That's what this function does. And then we're going to do the same thing for the second flag. We're going to do the same thing for the other overlay, which is going to be at -2. But not only that, we're also going to apply. So let's see. Not only that, but we're also going to apply PSPF flip, PSPF mirror, and finally PSPF pivot %. If I can spell. True. All of those will be true. So if you want to know more about that, we actually have the function over here on the wiki. PSPF pivot % makes it so that way whenever you're pivoting an overlay, you can actually determine it based on a scalar between 0 and 1. Otherwise, you'd have to determine it based off of coordinate offsets in the pixels, and that's going to be kind of hard to do especially if you're working with a lot of different graphic sizes. Might be graphic sizes and graphic positions. So we've set them all to true, so they'll do that. We got the PSPF flip flag for the -2 overlay, for overlay -2, because we want that to actually be flipped on the x-axis, so that way it's rendered in the left hand, right? We got PSPF mirror, so that way it can be used in conjunction with PSPF flip in order to flip the offsets of this overlay. So that way, when I call it to go in a different direction, it will actually be used to. It can be used to just mirror it automatically instead of me having to manually say, with this thing you gotta go and play it in a different direction. Okay, I'm almost done with this. Let's see. That's actually it for that one state. So then we're gonna go TNT1A0 A raise. And then we're gonna wait there. Deselect is gonna be much of the same. TNT1A6, and I'm using 6. Tick delay of 6 because I've determined that this raise animation, lowering animation, will actually take about 6 ticks to complete. Okay, let's see. So it's going to be more the same here, essentially. So we're going to do the entire thing here, except it's going to be calling lower animation. Lower anim. Lower. So A overlay 2, lower anim, A overlay -2, lower anim, and then we're applying the same flags and stuff there. And then here we're going to call TNT1A0 A_lower. And then wait. Alrighty, ready. We're going to go for TNT1A6, and then we're going to have it drop down into our true ready sequence. So it's going to be called ready loop. TNT1A1, a weapon ready. So all of this in the select state sequence is going to be 0 ticks. So after this happens, then it'll play the raise animation, which again is going to be 6 ticks. So it's going to drop right here immediately after going through the selection process, which is again 0 ticks. So then it's going to wait 6 ticks. So that way we can then do this without interrupting the raising animation. If we were doing this traditionally, you would actually see the raising animation right here. Like it would be QCG2A, and then we would, well, actually, yeah, it would have been A. So 6 A's right there. 1A, overlay, rotate. And it would actually be this weapon on the weapon itself. So PSPF weapon. No, not PSPF. PSP weapon. Right, that'll evaluate to 1, and then we can do 10 WF add, and then before that TNT1 a 0 a overlay pivot PSP weapon 1 1. That way we can have it. Actually, no, that was just for the lower animation. Let me see. Raise animation. The overlay rotate actually needs to be. We would actually put that at 60. So first it would actually rotate to 60, right? Then we would actually call this function over here 6 times. We would want to subtract it actually. There we go. So it should be -10. That way then it rotates into the right position. But we're not going to actually be doing that. We're not going to be calling it in this state sequence. I'll actually go and save this for later. We're going to go and call this in a later state sequence. We'll just put it down here real quick. Overlay animations. Raise anim. That's what the raise anim in the state sequence is going to look like. Go clean that up. And we'll come back to that in just a bit. Okay, so again, ready is going to be TNT1A6. Okay, ready loop again. We're going to wait here. And then we're going to do our fire state sequence. Okay, so during this thing, we're actually going to have this fire at a rate. We're going to have the entire weapon fire at a rate of 2 ticks. Yeah, it's going to be 2 ticks, a 2-tick delay. So we're going to be doing TNT1A2. So since you're holding 2 guns, each gun is going to be firing at a rate of 4 ticks essentially, but we're having them exactly stagger, so it will actually be a total combined fire delay of 2 ticks. So we're going to do 2 over here. So that approximates to about 17.5. It would be exactly 17.5 rounds per second. Okay, so if invoker.offhand, that's going to be referring to that Boolean up here. Then we call a overlay -2 fireframe. So it'll play the fire animation. Well, it'll start the fire animation. That will actually drop down in there, and I'll show you that in a bit. And a overlay flags. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Else, I'm going to make that 2, so that way it corresponds to the right hand. And then we don't need these since it's going to correspond to the right hand. Righty. So basically what we have here is that whenever you fire the weapon, well, actually I'll come back to that in a bit. Actually, I can actually do this right now. Here. Invoker.offhand equals not invoker.offhand. Okay, so this is the basic structure of what we're going to be doing in this weapon. So whenever we fire the weapon, then it's going to fire from one of these. Then it's going to fire from one of these places. So if it's not true, then it will fire from the right hand. If it is true, if it's firing from your offhand, which 9 out of 10 times is going to be your left hand, then it's going to play from here. And so then it'll alternate between that every time this this entire state is called. And this is all going to be one state. So, other than that, a weapon ready. Why did I capitalize all that? WRF no fire, WRF no switch. Because I like to have the bobbing function in here whenever this happens. I personally like to have bobbing in there, but I think there might be a better way to do this without having to call a weapon ready. But this way, in any case, this way we won't have it switch during this sequence, and we won't have it. We also won't have it fire if it happens to go here. Otherwise, we would create for ourselves an infinite loop. And that would not be good. Okay, let's see. Fire bullets. We're actually going to be using this function to spawn projectiles. The hit scans won't actually deal any damage, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. But it's essentially going to guide a projectile toward a hit scan that you fired. So we're going to do 1, 2, 2, -1, 0. Now, usually this is a function that would be used for glamour projectiles. Basically, the projectiles themselves are not supposed to do anything except give credence to the fact that you actually fired something from the gun. But I personally like to use this function to be able to spawn projectiles. The only thing is, it doesn't properly, this function as it stands right now doesn't properly assign targets. It doesn't assign you as the projectile's target. So like if you were to have these projectiles be explosive and then nullify self-damage on those explosions, it'll still damage you because it doesn't register you as the target of the projectile. So usually I like to use some variant of this that is custom coded to be able to include that sort of parameter, as well as some quaternion stuff to make sure that the spread stays accurate with the rotation matrix. But that's a story for another time. In any case, we're gonna go for null puff, which we will define later. FBF, no random puff C. And then for the missile, that is going to be spawned here, we're going to call it DWMG for dual wield machine gun projectile. It's going to be that nail that we had defined over here. Okay, let's see. We're going to have the spawn height be -8. We're going to have spawn offset Y be 13. That's 13, not 12. Times 1. We're going to do something cool over here. 1 minus 2 times invoker dot offhand. So what's happening here with this formula over here is that we're going to multiply this thing by 1 or by -1, depending on the value of invoker.offhand. So if invoker.offhand is false, this will evaluate to 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 1 minus 0 is 1. So it'll fire from the right. But if it fires from the left, if invoker.offhand is true, then this will evaluate to 1. 2 times 1 is 2. 1 minus 2 is -1. And then 13 times -1 is going to be -13. So as opposed to multiplying by 1, we'll multiply by -1, and that will cause it to fire from the left hand. It'll shift the offset so that way it looks more like it's firing from the left hand. So little quick maths over there. So a start sound, weapon, if I can spell right, /fire. We're going to have that play on the channel 4, and then we're going to have it do chan F overlap. And then we're going to call this thing, we're going to have this thing call a alert monsters. And that should do it for that. Finally, we'll have this go back to ready loop. Go to ready loop. Okay, so now back to the overlay animations that we'll have it play. Let's see. We're going to have a ready frame. This is going to drop down from over here, so we don't actually have to have the ready loop function call a overlay to go and render our ready frame over here. Right, so we're going to have this be QCG2, A1, wait, right? And then more animations the animations are going to be more manipulated from what's happening up here. We're just defining the animations that it will jump to automatically from here. So let's see. Okay, lower anim. TNT1, A0, A overlay pivot. Because we got to reset the overlay pivot whenever we call any new overlays. we can't use PSP weapon over here for the animation. Now I just realized that I had copied this over for. But the thing is that we're actually going to be copying. These will be called from overlays 2 and -2. So since this is called from within the overlay directly, we can actually instead use overlay ID to refer to the current overlay that is calling it, that where this code is being called. So when you're manipulating stuff within an overlay and you want stuff to apply directly to that same overlay, you can just use overlay ID. Alrighty, ready frame, lower anim. We still want the overlay pivot to be the same over here. And then we want the overlay rotation to go in the opposite direction. So now it's going to be 10 instead of -10. They're just going to add together. So then it'll add up to 60. Once it's all set and through, we're going to have it stop because it's not like we're going to be, because this is the lower animation. It's not going to be using this anymore because we're going to be switching to another weapon. Okay, now wireframe. TNT1A0. We're going to go have this jump to one of 3 random states that come next. So it's going to be a jump 256. Guaranteed to jump to one of these next to the next thing, which will be random 1 3. There we go. And then we're going to have QCG2 BCD 0 a jump 256 fire anim. So this is going to have a 100% chance to jump to one of these 3 frames over here, B, C, or D, which you can see over here, B, C, or D. So it'll play one of these flashes and then continue with the rest of the animation. And then when it does that, we're going to have it drop down to fire anim. So it'll be QCG2 #1 right. So that way it'll copy whichever one of these it jumped to, because from there it will call a jump function to directly jump right here. And then we'll play the rest of the animation. So it's QCG2EAA. So that way it's a total of 4 ticks. And then we go to ready frame. And that should do it for the weapon itself. Before we get to doing that, we should actually go and define our null puff and our projectile. And these are just here for the sake of demonstration. You can use whatever projectiles you want. And so I'll just start off with the projectile itself. Class DWMG projectile inherits from actor. The default block. We're going to give it the projectile combo flag, which is usually essential for creating projectiles. Okay, let's see. I like to do radius 2, height 4, speed 50. We'll have it deal 20 damage. Give it a decal of a bullet chip. And then make these things have a scale of 0.25 because these graphics are actually pretty big. Then we're going to give it these flags, right? And force XY billboard. States. Did I have a colon up there for states? No, I didn't. Good. Okay. Spawn. MICR a -1. Stop. Death. When it collides with something. TNT1A1. I'm gonna have it play a start sound, projectile / impact, and I'll play that nail gun impact sound, and then a spawn item X bullet buff. Stop. That'll do it for the projectile. Now for the null puff. I defined this thing because it's a puff that will actually not spawn, and that will appear to not spawn anything. It seems to do nothing. This is better than having it spawn actor, because the actor will actually just stay. The base actor class will just stay, even though it's not even though it's not going to be displaying anything. So that's not really good to use usually, sort of thing. So I created a custom actor that'll just despawn after a bit, but that way the puff will actually be there long enough for the projectile to be oriented toward it, and it'll despawn afterwards, so that way you can clean up, right? So class null puff. I like to use this actually in my mod Embers of Armageddon. Door. This thing is going to have a lot of flags over here, so default. We'll go for allow through flags, always puff, bloodless impact, because we don't want these to interact with anything in any way. Don't splash. No decal. No interaction. No trigger. Puff gets owner. Going to be more useful if you actually have properly pointed projectiles. Puff on actors. What do you say, Pud? Put it that. There we go. Sky explode and through actors. I actually forget if that actually does anything against actors. Okay, for that we're gonna have under the states spawn, crash, death, X death, TT1A10, and stop. And that'll do it. So let's go check this out real quick. So again, this is give dual wield MG. That's not good. It just disappeared right then. Let's see. Deselect, ready. Whoops, I said QCD2. That's not good. It's supposed to be G. Alright, let's do this again. I was trying to display a sprite that doesn't exist. Give dual wield G. Go, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Let's flip off. It's awesome. Now let's see how well it works. Very lovely. Seems to be working all this time. I have horrible aim, so forget that. Alright. This is beautiful, isn't it? And that's all you need to know for this video. So in future videos, I'm actually going to go into further things that you can actually do with this technique for dual wielding. So we can actually do independent operation of the individual firearms. And I actually have in my head cooking a bunch of ideas for actually how to create weapons that you can switch between for both hands. So you can not only individually operate both of those weapons, but you can also switch between the different weapons that you have in your inventory and then be able to wield them in both of your hands. So this is actually why I really like using QCDE's weapon sprites to this end, because they're beautiful, beautiful angled sprites to that end, and they'll perfectly be able to encapsulate exactly what I'm trying to show here. So I look forward to exploring the other ideas with you guys and showing you a new way to do these things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. If you found any value in this video, I would invite you to consider subscribing to the channel so that way you can see more when I post more. And if you know people that could benefit from this video, I would invite you to share it. And I also opened up donations, so that way if you guys wanted to support me monetarily, you can do that. The coffee link is in the is going to be in the video description. And I'll also have the project files there for you guys to be able to use as well. So that way you can go and experiment with it yourself. So that'll be all for today. And thank you for watching. It's been real. This is DoomKrakken. It's been real. Take care, guys.